until now, until Perek Tezvav, we were learning about how every time I learn Torah, I'm changing the Olamais El Yonim. I'm changing everything and therefore changing the whole world. And now he's telling us, you should know that Hamavarech Yisbarech. This is not without its benefit package. And somebody who gives a bracha gets a bracha. Okay, we are in Shaar Daled Perek Tezvav. What I'd like to do is just review quickly and synopsize the Perek, finish the Perek, and tell you what I really don't understand about this Perek. In Brisk was taught that if you say you don't understand, that's as good as coming up with a pshat. So I'm happy to do that. The Perek starts off in Perek Tezvav, Hine hamevarech misbarech. Umiberchasan shala olamis yivarech gam ha'adam. So Yesod Aleph that we learned was that hamevarech yisbarech, that if until now, until Perek Tezvav, we were learning about how every time I learn Torah, I'm changing the Olamais El Yonim. I'm changing everything and therefore changing the whole world. And now he's telling us, you should know that Hamavarech Yisbarech. This is not without its benefit package. And somebody who gives a bracha gets a bracha, which we spend time understanding why that is. Don't want to go over that right now. Hamavarech Yisbarech. And now the question is, in what way do I get a bracha from learning Torah? And he goes on to say that, just try to follow with me. For instance, kol adinim bishin mistalken me'elav. Any negative din that can come from the Shemayim, it's mistalken me'elav, doesn't go on me. And he quotes here another Torah Eliyahu. And here if you go a few paragraphs in, I just want to spend a moment on this reviewing. Sham Reish Perek Vav, Heviani Hamelech Chadarav, a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Kishem sheyesh la'Kadosh Baruch Hu Chadrei Chadarim b'Torasai, kach yesh lahem l'talmidei chachamim l'kol echad ve'echad Chadrei Chadarim b'Torasai. Ve'imra isa sha yisurim memashreshin uvayin alav, rutz l'chadrei Torah, umiyad ha-yisurim baruchen mimcha. So translation is that there are many chambers and inner chambers in Hashem's Torah, which can mean like there's pshat, remez, drush, so that there's multiple levels of understanding it, or it could mean something else. But what the Nefesh Hachaim is saying here, it's actually the Torah Eliyahu, which is saying, or the Chazal, that just like Hashem has Chadrei Chadarim, many chambers and inner chambers, so too does a Talmid Chacham. What it means here, somebody who learns Torah has Chadrei Chadarim b'Torasei. We have Chadrei Chadarim b'Torasei. So I was told after last week's share that they still didn't understand what this means. I didn't explain it well, and probably the reason I didn't explain it well is because I don't understand it well, but let's try. Umiyad ha-yisurim baruchen mimcha. And when you go into your Chadrei Chadarim, so Yisurim will leave me, or bedelin mimcha. Baruchen mimcha. They'll run away from me. Now, we find many people that are learning Torah and they have Yisurim. So that question, I don't know the answer to. If I knew the answer to that, I would understand what Moshe Rabbeinu didn't understand of Lama Yesh Tzadik V'Ralei. And it's hard to distinguish what's Yisurim Shel Ava and the different types of suffering and pain that all of us incur. As I often report and update, I haven't yet met anybody that doesn't have some kind of a peckle. Everybody's got something going on. What are the Chadrei Chadarim of Torah? And let's say all of us here all of us have learned Torah, some more than others. And we have Yisurim. All of us here at some point or another have had Yisurim, different types of suffering. So somehow or another, there's this trick of running into my Chadrei Chadarim and thereby avoiding the Yisurim. What am I supposed to do? What's the kesher between my Torah, Chadrei Chadarim, and the Yisurim? And this is, he says, HaMavarech Yisbarach. So it seems to me, I just want to say one sentence from Reb Tzadok HaKohen in Resisei Laila. Reb Tzadok HaKohen, Kohen Gadol, in the Resisei Laila, so he tells us that when a person feels, whenever a person feels tested or challenged or unsafe, so a human being's tendency is to run into a place which is safe for them. Harehu boireach lemakom, which is safe for him. So what that means is, let's say a person does a certain Aveira. So, and he says, no, I'm never going to do that Aveira again. This is what Reb Tzadok is talking about. He's talking about Shuvah. So you don't do it again until which point that you're challenged. And this is very important, Reb Tzadok unto itself, until which point that you're challenged and you're in pain and you feel persecuted somehow or another. So I did Shuvah, but I'm persecuted or I'm suffering. So a person will run to, this is a dangerous thing, a person will run to their safe place. And the safe place doesn't mean you're running into the miklat. You could very easily run into one of your old habits, and it doesn't, and then that's where you are because that's where you feel comfortable. I'll just give you an example. Like, let's say somebody for their whole, for many, many years, whenever they were in a huge amount of pain, they took drugs. There's an example. So, and then they swear off the drugs. So it doesn't mean too much until one is challenged again. And then when they're challenged again, the question is they're going to run into their safe place, the place where they know how to hide from the suffering, and they can get right back into drugs. And we found this with many, many people that, maybe even ourselves, that, we do tshuva. But I'm not talking about like just Yetzer Hara. There are places that I've created in my life which are comfortable for me, and I feel protected in those places, and a person will run back to those places. Reb Tzadok talks about even if somebody has had an affair with an Eshes Ish, and Lo Yaleinu, God forbid, and somebody, I'm thinking about this because I'm trying to help somebody right now in this situation. And, he's sworn off it. Oh, I hate her, got her out of my life. My wife wants to leave me. I love my wife. She's the love of my life. And I'm thinking to myself that, okay, we'll go through the process of tshuva, but the question is, that's right now, what's going to happen when you need a safe haven? Are you going to run back to that or not?
Isn't that Rambam Shuvah Gemara? Whether you're in the same exact place, all the same criteria, I think we don't have to get to that level. Or it's just saying, Lamaisa, you may get there, and that's the question.
B'diuk. So it's a danger. If you don't get to the level that ani ish acher v'lo eini oiso ish echata, then there's always that little, let's call it for our purposes here, that chadrei chadorim, physical or psychological, that I can run into. I'm comfortable in that spot.
But that's a negative, the Rav's saying that's a negative.
That's on the negative side.
Okay.
There's a positive side to it. And that is, this is what I'm saying now is a chiddush, but maybe it's what the Nefesh Hachaim means. And that is that if a person is struggling and suffering, and you're Talmud Chacham, through and through a Talmud Chacham, the Torah has really made a deep roshim on me. However, it's, as you go through life, you get more and more superficial, and you get into the habit of Torah, and you do things, mitzvot, like the Kehillas Shivtei says in Parak Aleph, you end up doing everything mitzvahs hanoshim milumada. You just do things by rote, by habit, which is not such a bad thing. That means you're a frum Jew. That's a good thing. But what happens is, when your habit gets challenged, do those habits hold water? Do they stand? Will you continue? Or do you fall into this dark place? A Talmud Chacham can fall back into his Chadrei Chadarim, which is Kulei Torah. So the Chadrei Chadarim of a Talmud Chacham is not, he goes back to drugs, he goes back to, let's say, that Torah which either inspired him to begin with, or that Torah which was made such a deep impression on their soul. The real, and I think Torah, by the way, in this case, has a very broad definition. I'm not talking about you go back to that Rashba, maybe also, or that Rambam. I think what it means is that, the deep thoughts that I had, the moments of true understanding, which all of us experience, but a Talmud Chacham has internalized certain things, certain ideas, but you lose those ideas as you lose your way. Everybody loses their way. So you fall back. Where do you fall back into? If you're like a shakran, you fall back into sheker. If you're Talmud Chacham, you fall back into emes. So that's what I believe is the definition of the Chadrei Chadarim. Everybody with me on this? It's very, very strong. And I believe that's what Reb Tzadok says, and maybe that's what he means also. Now, what does that have to do with Yisurim Borchim? Miyad ha-Yisurin Borchim mimcha. We don't necessarily find this to be so true that all of a sudden my the pain that I'm in goes away. So I don't know if Chazal say that it does, or maybe it's mayachas to the pain, because maybe the suffering is on a superficial level, but that's not me. I'm not there. I'm in a deeper place right now. Can we go into that kind of a deeper place? That's my question. That's what we're talking about here. And I think that the Yisurim, suffering that Hashem sends us, not talking about now Yisurim Shel Ava, which is a complicated idea, but the Yisurim sometimes takes us, refocuses us and reframes things when we're, and brings us into that deeper place. And I think that might be Yisurim Barchin Mimcha, like, this is not what it's, this is not what it's at. I was thinking a lot about I often think about the Kloisenberger Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, who I met and I received a bracha from. So the Kloisenberger Rebbe was famous for always having a smile on his face and always receiving people. B'sever panim yafos, with a beautiful smile, and then found out that since he was in the concentration camps, Ymach Shemam v'Zichron, they did something to him. He had an ongoing migraine headache all day and all night. Couldn't sleep because of it. He couldn't eat properly because of it. He couldn't do anything properly. I mean, it's a disabilitating headache. And I thought to myself, Gewalt, like, how is he smiling all the time? And the answer is that there's such a thing I'm saying the answer academically because I'm not smiling all the time. But there's such a thing as somebody living in a different reality than the reality that the scientist might see or the doctor might see. And that's in a reality of Chadrei Chadarim. This is the ultimate in not just mindfulness, but the ultimate in spirituality, where a person is in touch and falls back into his safe place or her safe place. And that's a very, very deep spiritual place, which I believe is the definition of Torah, into the Chadrei Chadarim. So that's that's my understanding of the Chadrei Chadarim.
Could this be applied to Rabbi Akiva when he was dying?
It's not just applied. I believe it's the makar, meaning Rabbi Akiva, not only died with Shema, but he died b'simcha. What do you mean? What's everybody feeling bad for me for? Chol nafshecha, my whole life, kol yamai. I'm saying these words, but masai yavai liyadei v'akayimena. When am I going to be able to do it? He was living. Rabbi Akiva, who apparently wasn't always like that, but he got to his point where his Torah was so deep, and through some type of to use current language, some type of a meditative process, he was actually able to find a very deep place in himself where he didn't even feel that pain. I'll tell you a story that I saw myself with our Rebbe, Rav Scheinberg, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. I'm not comparing to Rabbi Akiva, but I remember that I accompanied him with his son, Rav Simcha Scheinberg. Don't ask me why I accompanied him, but I did. To Dr. Miller, who was then a dentist in Yerushalayim that spoke English. He was an Australian, and that's where the Anglo yeshiva Bachram tended to go, to this Dr. Miller. Don't know if he's alive or not. He's Zichrei Baruch. And we went in there with the Rosh Yeshiva, and the Rosh Yeshiva is with his talus and his tefillin and his Gemara. And, he's waiting, and the doctor says, there's a tooth. He was in pain. That's why I went to the dentist. And the doctor said, I need to pull that tooth, before the days of the prominence of crowns. I need to pull that tooth. So Rav Scheinberg said, now I would have been like running down the street. Rav Scheinberg said, so pull it. He says, yeah, but we have a problem on your chart because I had a slight heart condition. And he said, I'm afraid to give you the amount of, anesthesia, Novocaine, whatever that was they used then, to numb the pain. So it's a very painful process. And I'll never forget this. Rav Scheinberg said, okay, give me a couple of minutes. I'll never forget that. Give me a couple of minutes. And, he was a man that you looked at him and you think you saw one thing, but you didn't see all the deep layers inside. You never saw all the Chadrei Chadarim. All you say was just a nice man, But we who knew him knew that there were many, many levels to that depth, and very, very deep. And who knows what was going through his mind. But he said, give me a couple of minutes. And sure enough, without Novocaine, gave him a couple of minutes. I don't know. He was like, I'm probably involved in a sugya or whatever he was involved with. And he pulled the tooth, and he went out. Like no anesthesia or anything. Now, I can't imagine that he shut down his nervous system, but what happened is he was able to walk into, was a tzaddik gadol, he was able to walk into a whole different reality. It's something I think everybody could do. This is something you have to learn how to do. And it's not like he put himself into a trance. It's just that he put himself into a different place. And I think that's the Chadrei Chadarim that a Talmid Chacham could go through to, as opposed to where you don't feel it in the same way, as opposed to the Chadrei Chadarim, which a Baal Aveira could go through. Okay. If we move further into the Nefesh Hachaim, and I want to just move ahead, just skip a few paragraphs. Every word is important, but there's a few zayars that support the point. Then he says, towards the end, V'chein amru zichreinim livracha, that there's a Gemara in Saita. Parag Gimel de Saita, Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. There's a Gemara in Saita. a Torah agune magne min hayisurim. Same idea, but it's a little bit different. The Torah guards me from Yisurim. Now, I just want to point out in Pshat that guarding me, like a tris, guarding me is different than hayisurim baruchen mimenu. Nachon? Yeah, Yaakov, you with me on this? There's a big difference between Yisurim not coming on me and Yisurim suffering that I don't feel. So this is a bigger chiddush than the dentist chair. Here we're talking about the Yisurim are Yisurim HaTorah, rather, agune magne mina Yisurim. Does everyone have the place there? Bain, and here's the second chiddush, Bain be'idna de asakba, Bain be'idna de lo asakba. Whether I'm exactly learning Torah right now, or whether it's not be'idna, like the Gemara in Yevamos talks amudim and amudim about be'idna. Be'idna means that it's mamish at the same time. So Torah will protect me, whether it's at the simultaneous to the Yisurim, or even if I'm not right now, I'm not in the middle of learning Torah, but the Torah that I learn somehow protects me. And it means to say, obviously, it means to say that, there's a madrega. Please listen to me carefully, because I don't want to give anybody the wrong idea. But there's an idea of Oisik B'Torah, and there's an idea of somebody whose whole life is Osik B'Torah. If you like, I'll give you just a trivial example. Let's say your wife wants you to say a Dvar Torah at the Shabbos table. Okay. It says in this week's Parsha with a Dvar Torah. You read it in a book, you got it on the internet, you said your own chiddush, doesn't make any difference. You say a Dvar Torah, which is a good thing. That's what I'm saying. Hear me clearly, I'm not against it. It's a good thing. It's the right surah, it's the right thing for the kids and everything. Very interesting, like if you have the schus of visiting Gedolei Torah at their Shabbos table, you very seldom hear somebody saying a Dvar Torah at the Shabbos table. Elamai, the whole thing is Torah. The whole Metzias is ruchnius and learning and even not talking. But davukba, as he says in a second, kol zman shuhu davuk. There's an Indian of advekus. That's my whole, and that's what it means that, two Talmidei Chachamim are talking, afilu sichas chulin, shel Talmidei Chachamim. It doesn't make a difference. It's not about the actual learning. You can come to a point. Actual learning is good. I'm not against it. I'm all for it. But it's also about just being present in Torah and Torah being present in my life. And therefore, everything that I say, you say, our whole conversation is a conversation of Torah.
That's the Pashup Shot in Keim Chayenu?
Keim Chayenu. It's a Pashup Shot in so many things that, I think I don't have it in front of me, but I just want, it's worth reviewing something which I learned, and the Rosh Yeshiva used to quote all the time. I was telling somebody that, I had a great influence by the Rosh Yeshiva, but I very seldom find a time to quote him or to, so he said to me, what do you mean? You don't talk that, you don't quote. I get it. So it's a funny phenomenon. But the Chayei Adam in his Hakdama writes, and it's a beautiful lashon, and I've shared it before, but I just want to say the idea. He said, I'm writing a Sefer Chayei Adam. He was in Talmidei Agra. Before the Mishnah Berurah, he was the Paisek Hadar. But he was a businessman. in the he was a businessman. He did, in other words, businessman. I mean by a businessman is that he bought things and he sold them. That's what he did. He was a businessman, buying and selling. And he said that probably anybody who looks at that, I wrote a book, they'll say, Hagav Shoel Banavim, who's this guy to write a book? Balabas. And Balabas. So he says, I remember the Lashon, Teda Lachem Achai. He says, my brothers, I want you to know that I do business. But however, the whole time I'm doing business, I'm thinking about Torah. When I go to Leipzig, that was the place of the big fairs, where you bought and sold things, the shuk, Leipzig. So I'm going to Leipzig and I'm doing business and I'm making transactions and I'm negotiating. Daiti Oleha, my head is in Torah. When I'm coming home and I'm selling something, Daiti Oleha, my head is on Torah. When I go to sleep at night, Daiti Oleha. And when I wake up on the morning, Daiti Oleha. And he says that this book, Chaya Adam, Chachmas Adam, the two svarim that he wrote, these books are not the fruit of necessarily research. It's something, of course, learning research, no question about it. But what the depth of it is that this is Kihem, as Yaakov says, Kihem Chayenu v'Yarech Yameinu. This is my whole life I'm putting in front of you. Daiti Olav, and I think that's what it means. I mean, I think so. Therefore, if you're learning Torah, it's Meginu Matzil, the Gemara says, Bein be'idna de asak, bein be'idna de loy asak. Whether I'm b'diuk in the middle of Seder Sheni or Daf Yomi is not the issue. The issue is what's my life, and that's something which is also part of my Chedrei Chadarim. Because my Chedrei Chadarim is where my head and my heart is, even when I'm not sitting with a Gemara in front of me, even when I'm in business, doing whatever I'm doing. Not as a distraction, by the way, as an enhancement to whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm doing it with Torah. So the Nefesh Hachaim says, Kihi, we know that everybody knows this pasuk well. Right? So it's talking about, you thought it was talking about a husband and a wife. That you're always taking care of your wife. No, also talking about the Torah. Shlomo Melech was talking about the Torah, and the Torah we have a relationship. Now this itself is just gewalt. A relationship? Who has a relationship with Shakespeare? You have a Ben Torah. I'll tell you another thing that I learned, and that is that Rashivi used to always say that we say before Kriya Shema, we say, that's pretty strong, no? Same believe Beinu lahavin, lahaskil, lishmaya, lilmaid, lishmar, lasais, lakayim. What else? That's called divrei saresecha ba'ava yet. Ava. That's lishma. And then we say, redundant. What's the repetition for? We just said the same. We just said this prayer. We just said this. So why are we saying now again? So we learned that the pshat is that the first madrega is a madrega of what I do. The second madrega, is a madrega not of what we do, but a madrega of what we are. My eyes are Torah eyes. My heart is a Torah heart. Achdus of Ava and Yira. Two separate things, Ava and Yira. So that's the complete internalization. I believe it ties right back to what we said of the Chadrei Chadarim of the Torah. Gmalasu toiv v'lo ra. I saw in the Ber Mayim Chaim, one of the Talmidim of the Magid. God, you there? Tell us who the Ber Mayim Chaim is. We've got to turn on your little thing there.
Talmud of the Magid of Mezrich, I believe, no?
Yes. The Chernovich. So he's one of the biggest of the Rebbes that from him came out. He wrote the Ber Mayim Chaim, which is, by the way, I just recently started looking at it. And just a beautiful sefer. Is he also the Toldos? Not the Toldos, the Sidurei Shel Shabbos.
Is that him?
I think so. I'm not sure. Chernovich is a Rebbe. Anyways, God knows these things in his sleep. I'm surprised you have to look in a book that's just humble.
No, he's not. He's not the Siddur Shel Shabbos.
There you go. What was his name?
Siddur Shel Shabbos?
No, the Ber Mayim Chaim.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have that yet.
Anyways, he says, actually, I might have his wash in here. Anyways, trust me on this because it's late. The Ber Mayim Chaim says that when Hashem creates the world with or, with like it's not really or, but a mushal, or is a mushal. So it's easier for us to imagine, a stream of light coming in the world and creating that. And a Talmud Chacham, he says, becomes by learning Torah, it's like ner mitzvah of a Torah or, right? So becomes batzmusai or, he says. These were very moving words to me. And now that or, you become, by learning Torah, you become a cheftza shel or. So therefore, the hoyer einenu b'sarasecha. And now, that cheftza shel or is my obligation to give to everybody around me in the world. So it's not just, he says, that when I teach Torah, learn Torah, teach Torah, whatever, I'm bringing light into the world. That's too easy. But rather, not just I'm bringing light into the world, I become a beacon of light. I become light. I take the Torah internalized into me, actually turns me into a light. And so when we're talking about the benefit package, I'm a varech, hisbarech. So what we're talking about becomes a beacon of light. This is something we can all become, he says. That's what everybody has to become. Has to be a beacon of light. I'm saying beacon of light is still not right. Hu atzmai are. Anyways, let me end with. He says here, "Gmalasu toiv v'lo ra kol yemei chayecha." So somebody tell me the translation of Gmalasu.
Somebody else.
Be gomel or so. To give.
What does the word gamal mean?
It's like a return.
Gala yelad gamal.
Okay.
Oh, gamal means ligmol. It's like ligmol tova. It's like to return something for something.
You sure?
At least in modern Hebrew, that's how we use it.
Right. So
is it returning something or just giving over? You're doing a good to somebody.
what does gemilas chasadim mean?
Doing chasadim.
So here's what I said. I'm going to end with what I don't know instead of ending what I don't know. But let me just tell you a few things that come to mind. Vayigdal hayelad. Somebody just said vayigomal. Vayigomal. What does it say? And Yitzchak.
Vayigamal. It's in the Nifel that he.
Yitzchak grew up
He's
and
receiving
he
end
was
of being.
weaned. He was weaned. That's what that means. Vayigomal. Gmalasu.
They stopped doing the chesed to him. He stopped getting in that case.
Okay. Gmalasu toiv v'lo ra. We make a bracha hagoimel l'chayovim toivos shegimolani kol tov. And we say every day, Ashir Allah Hashem, Ki Gamal Olai. Okay, now how do we get from weaning the baby, which is actually, like Avram says, is a sort of a withdrawal, weaning the baby to Hagoyim L'chayavim Toivos, Malasu Toiv Loira. It's a curious word, Gamal. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I want to posit this theory, and I think it's very important. And if you go for a second to the Hagah in the Nefesh Hachaim, Umashikosev Gemalasu Kigmul, this little Hagah here is full of chidushim, but I just want to say the first one. Kigmul, the word Gemul, there's a Sefer HaGemul, which talks about Olam Haba. Kigmul Perush Tashlum Gemul Lamisha Hetiv Itay Mikaidim. That's exactly what Gil said. Recompense. What's the word I'm thinking?
Compensate or something.
Recompense.
Thank you. In other words, it's like you did this for me, I'll do this for you. So it's not just Gemilas Chasadim then. Gemilas Chasadim is like you would think, I'm just doing a chesed, even if you never did anything for me and you don't expect anything back. But there's Osa Chesed also. Yaakov Avinu said, it's a chesed asher imasiso imadi chesed ve'emes. It's an asiyas chesed, but what's a Gemilas Chasadim? It's kedai for us to, I'm just going to give you this for homework here. What does Gomel mean? Gomel Chayavim Toivos, and I believe that. Let me just throw out a theory in words that there's such a thing as putting somebody on their feet, helping them reach a level of maturity where they're on their own. And I believe I'll be miyashiva with the Nefesh Hachaim. I'll try, but I believe like. Vayigdal hayeled vayigamal. The child grew up and he was weaned. What does that mean? I fed you, I took care of you, I loved you, and then go. Now you're on your own. Find your own food. This is, by the way, a huge chesed, because the chesed that you're doing for somebody with our children is when we stop helicoptering them and protecting them, and we've created a situation where they can take care of themselves. I'm not saying we should stop taking care of our children, but I'm saying the idea is to get them to a point of vayigamal. They are weaned. That's the idea. It becomes a chay noiseis hatzmai. So I think that gamal is the act of taking of helping another person stand on their own. Hagoymel l'chayavim toivos gamalani kol tov. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes me stand. I believe that Hirsch says, Rav Hirsch says in the Chumash, I found it before. I think Hirsch says that when we talk about Gamal, give me 1 second. It says in Devarim, Vayotzeitz tzitz vayigmal shkedim. The story of Aaron. Same way is referring to a mother regarding the child, hence weaning. Perhaps, listen to this, the camel is also called Gamal because it can go such a long time without drinking. In other words, it's on its own, independent. Looking at all happenings as fruit matured on the tree of time. What words? Looking at all happenings as fruit matured on the tree of time. Isn't that beautiful? Gamal in general would mean bringing these fruits of time to maturity, to guide the fate of men. Thus, Ashir ola Hashem ki gamal oloi. I sing unto Hashem for what has happened to me. He brought maturity for me. Kol tagmulai alai. Ma ashiv laHashem. Kol tagmulai alai. So it's similar to what I'm saying. Not exactly, but the nakuda is that the pshat and gomal, to be gomel, gemilas chasadim. What's the highest level of gemilas chasadim? To make that the person is no longer dependent on you or on anybody. And the biggest level of gemilas chasadim would be gemilas chasadim is when you wean somebody from the tzedakah, when they're no longer dependent. Independence. Weaning is independence. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, even if we're chayavim, but you see, Hashem saved me from this accident or from this desert or from this body of water, arba tzrichim lahaydos. But the bracha is so curious that hagoymel lechayavim toivos shegmalani kol toiv. He allows me to stand even in a makam of sakana, even when I shouldn't be standing. So let me. But I need you for homework to investigate this a little bit. This word gamal is like a fascinating root, gimel mem lamed. But I think it becomes very important for this piece of Hachaim. But let me just tell you quickly, l'sayim, the Briskerov. Briskerov says, it's in the Sefer, V'ani b'chastecha v'tachti, yogel libi b'shuasecha, asher l'Hashem ki gomal alai. So the Briskerov asks, V'ani b'chastecha v'tachti. What does that mean? I trust you, Hashem, you will take care of me. So what does it mean, I trust you'll take care of me? I don't have the thing yet, but I hope you'll take care of me. If you already have the thing, you don't need betachon. I already have it. So the Brisker Rav says, "Ani b'chastecha b'tachti." I trust you'll take care of me. You're chesed. Ani b'chastecha b'tachti, yogel libi b'shuasecha. And yet, yogel libi b'shuasecha. So is this the same guy? On one hand, he's ani b'chastecha b'tachti. He's holding in betachon. And on the other hand, yogel libi b'shuasecha. I'm already getting all excited, making a kiddush for the Yeshua that you've given me, the chastira. So the Brisker Rav says that the answer is Ashira LaHashem, Ashira LaHashem. I'm singing out to Hashem, Ki Gomal Alai. As the Brisker Rav, the Knech, Ki means Ki Ilu. Ki has 4 definitions. And in this case, he said it means Ki Ilu, because I have to have betachon to the madrega of ki'ilu gamal alai. So therefore, even though I'm still v'ani b'chastecha b'tachti, I could already be in yoga libi b'shuasecha, ashira l'Hashem. Why? Ki'ilu gamal alai. So that's Adkan the Brisker Rav, which to me fits beautifully with what we're saying, because Hashem is being maimed us. Like we can rely on Hashem. That is betachon. Betachon is the weaning where we can rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that even if we're chayavim, hagoymel chayavim toivos, shegmalani kol tov, that there's a gemilas chasadim here. He's going to allow me to stand on my own 2 feet, and for this, David HaMelech says Ashira LaHashem. Yogel libi b'shuasecha. So it's not even the future, it's already the present. Okay. Something to think about. Dan, are you still there somewhere?
Yep.
Should I shut off the recording?
That's a
I'll shut off and see if it records in flux in all by itself.
I just need you the host again. You are the host once again.
I am. Okay. Baruch havatzlach. Have a good Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos, right there.